Uh, Welcome to the Ippa Hpat prep event. I'll hand over to one of the panelists today, Ramin. Ramin, over to you.
I'm gonna get the first slide, please.
Yep, we are at the first slide now.
The next one, please.
Sure.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ramin, and I'm a final year medical student from RCSI. You're all very welcome to the Irish Pakistani Professional Association's annual HPAT webinar. Today, I'm joined by Adil, who is in final year medicine in UCD, and Hamad, who is in third year at Trinity. We also have three moderators from the IPPA team here with us today, Mrs. Lubna Mirza, Dr. Mustafa Mahmood, Mr. Khalid Abbas. And this webinar is an annual event where medical students in universities across Ireland share their tips and tricks for achieving a high score in this challenging exam. So today we'll be playing a recording of one of our previous webinars, and we'll be covering the following topics. So an introduction to the HPAT, our tips for sections 1, 2, and 3, tips for the exam day itself, a student's personal experience of improving their score from the 55th to the 95th percentile, alternate routes into medicine, and then finally we'll have time for questions at the end. So we have a great lineup of speakers for you all today. We're all medical students in different colleges, including UCD, Trinity, and RCSI, and we all achieved high scores in our HPAT exam. Myself, Adil, and Hamad are here live today to answer any questions you have at the end. And can I get the next slide, please? So before we begin, we just have a few ground rules. Please make sure to keep yourself muted and your video turned off throughout the webinar. If you have any questions, please ask them in the chat at any point. And please just note that this webinar is recorded for improvement purposes. And just a disclaimer that we can't guarantee a high score in the HPAT exam. We're all just medical students sharing our personal tips and experiences. So that's all from me, and we'll get started with the recording now.
So we'll just give you a brief introduction to who IPPA are. So IPPA are the Irish Pakistani Professionals Association, and this organization was founded with a vision to guide and support the new generation. We are a group of professionals from different specialties who believe in collective efforts to promote integration in our society without compromising on cultural values and beliefs, and to make Ireland a country where people can live with peace, harmony, and respect. The main aims and objectives of IPPA are to highlight the achievements of Irish Pakistani professionals and their contribution to Irish society, to provide professional support and career guidance to the young generation in Ireland, to help integrate the Pakistani and Irish communities, and to support community welfare initiatives. IPPA has over 800 members at the moment, and IPPA is split up into two main branches, so which are IPPA Med and IPPA Tech. So IPPA Med is more so for the doctors and other healthcare professionals, and IPPA Tech is more for the IT engineers and the rest of the professionals. So currently 85% of IPPA members are doctors, and the rest of the members are comprised of professionals like IT professionals, accountants, engineers, solicitors, business managers, and so on and so forth. So now I'll just pass it on to Munib to speak to you a bit, to give you some information on the HVAT. Thank you very much.
Hello guys, my name is Munib. I'm a third year medical student here in RCSI. So I'm going to be talking to you guys just a bit about what exactly the HPAT is. So the HPAT is designed to assess logical reasoning and problem solving skills, as well as non-verbal reasoning and ability to understand the thoughts, behavior, and intentions of people. So this test has a strong focus on general skills and personal abilities that have been identified as important for a competent health professional. So it is unlike any exam you have done before, and all questions are multiple choice, and you have to select the most appropriate answer. So there's 3 sections. We're going to go into more detail of these later on individually. So how to beat the HPAT. So people will tell you that you can't study for this exam. However, there are 2 things you could tackle, and those are timing and stress. So the HPAT is a challenging 2.5-hour exam, which requires a focused and disciplined mindset. It is unlike any exam you've done before, and it's probably going to be the hardest one that you do. And most people, the way it's made, you're not going to finish it comfortably for most people. So every second counts. And the key to doing well is to get the maximum amount of questions right in the shortest amount of time. So it's really important that you incorporate this aspect of timing into your study. And if you study without time pressure, this might allow you to answer more questions, but it won't be very useful. And the second thing is stress. So, you could do all the preparation, but if on the day, you stress yourself out and you're not calm, it's all going to go to waste. So, on the day, you should be telling yourself, you've tried your best, and you should just try your best now in the exam. Before, while you're studying, you should focus on your weaknesses, but on the day of the exam, you need to focus on your strengths. So the HPAT works with percentiles. So to get into medicine now, especially with the points inflation, you need around about 90th percentile, which is 180 points. And I'm now going to move on to a general Section 1 guide. So first of all, why would a doctor need Section 1 skills? So doctors need to be able to think about problems quickly and reach correct solutions under pressure. So Section 1 is 42 questions in 60 minutes. So it's an average of 1 minute and 25 seconds per question. And there's 4 types of questions. So logical reasoning, problem solving, data interpretation, and research methods. So just some general tips. So the first thing is timing. So Section 1 is the most time challenge section. So I think this is going to be a main focus of what I'm going to be saying. So first of all, there's 4 different types of questions. However, logical reasoning and research methods tend to take longer. So it's okay to spend a tiny bit longer on these 2 types of questions, as long as you compromise for it by being quicker on the logical reasoning and the data interpretation. The second thing is you need to have a way of staying on pace during the exam. So this is probably the most important tip I'm going to give, is that it's absolutely essential to have some sort of timing technique. So what I personally used was every 15 minutes, I had to have done 11 questions, and I would check that every 15 minutes. So let's say 15 minutes have gone and I check, let's say 15 minutes have gone and I check how many questions I've done, and I've done less than 11. Let's say I've done 7. Then I know I need to speed things up. Let's say 15 minutes have passed and I've done 15 questions. Then I know maybe I'm going too fast. I have more time. I can be more relaxed. So I feel like this is absolutely essential, because the last thing you want is, you answer a lot of questions well, but then you just completely run out of time. So how to improve Section 1 speed, again, really important. You have to do your practice under time conditions, otherwise it's useless. And another thing I'll say is, when you're reading the stimulus, obviously there's a lot of emphasis put on speed reading, but you need to make sure that you're not, reading so fast to the point where you're not actually understanding what's being said. So what I used to do at the start was I would try read it too quickly. And then when I answer the question, I have no clue what's going on. I have to go back and read it again. So make sure you read it once, but you read it properly, and you underline and you pick the pieces of information that you actually need to know and underline them. And that's going to help you loads. And then another main really important thing is mental maths. Working up to the HPAT, you just need to start getting really quick and good at this mental maths. It's going to come in really useful in the exam. And another really, really important thing, this kind of ties in with the timing, is you have 2 different types of questions. You have individual questions, which is 1 stimulus and then 1 question after. But you can also have unit questions where it's 1 stimulus followed by 3, 4, or 5 questions. And what I did, and this helped me loads, was that anytime in the exam that I saw a single individual question, I would almost always skip it. I'd look at it, give it a really quick educated guess, and just skip it, so that I could do all of the unit questions, because they are way more worth your time and they're far greater time investment. And make sure you don't, when you're skipping a question, don't leave the question blank. Just put in an educated guess, because it's not guaranteed you're going to have time to go back and fill in your answer. So logical reasoning, these questions involve a series of statements and you need to select the response that can be most logically drawn from the information. So always choose the strongest conclusion, and when answering these statements, cross off answers that are wrong and work through the remaining options one by one. And if you're under time pressure, then so in these questions you have to test all of the options that they give. And if you're under time pressure, then the first one that you've tested and it seems to be right, just go with that. Always read the question stem carefully. This is really important. One word in the question stem can completely change the answer. Let's say it says which of the following must be true. Then what a lot of students do is they make the mistake that some answers may be true, but they may also be wrong. So in that question, because it says must be true, that's going to completely change what the answer is. Only use the information given in the stimulus. Don't use prior knowledge to answer a question. Stay within the scope. For example, if it says that smoking is good in the stimulus, then you have to just go with smoking is good. Don't make any assumptions. And another really important concept is you need to understand the difference between correlation and causation. So for example, an increase in temperature, it can lead to increased sales of ice cream. So that's an example of causation. And increased temperature can also lead to increased use of sunscreen. That's also called causation. So the ice cream sales are increased and the sunscreen use is also increased, but they're not causing each other to be increased. They would be correlated, and that's really important to understand. So problem solving, make sure you abbreviate components of the question, identify and understand the rules of the question, write them in the side, make deductions. For example, if it says John is older than Connor and Connor is older than Adam, then you can deduce that John is older than Adam and then write that down. Another really useful thing is you can make your own whole number values in some questions. So for example, if it says 20% of the population are vegetarian and 1% of vegetarians are vegans, then, for example, make the population 1,000 and write down example values for that. And if you're spending too long on a question, then make an educated guess and just move on. So for data interpretation, these questions will involve the use of graphs, tables, and other representations like Venn diagrams, flowcharts, and 3-axis graphs. So some questions can contain the same information represented by multiple of these diagrams. For these questions, the first thing to do is to just look at the whatever graph they give and just make sure you understand what's going on. Rather than reading the simulation and then looking at the data, just look at the data, you understand what this is talking about. Very important, look at the axes and make sure you know what the units are. Let's say it says 10 on one of the units, that could be 10 million, 10 years, it could be anything. So make sure you pay attention to units and you know what's on each of the axes. So research methods. So for this, prior knowledge of research trials and investigations can help you understand some basic concepts. So these questions will involve identifying the results of a study, making conclusions from data, and proposing how the study can be improved. So knowing basic scientific method can definitely help you in this. So also remember that the number of people studied in the population is important, so higher numbers will be better. And also know the sample of the population taken is also important, as it should accurately represent the population. So there is some useful vocabulary to learn: participants, subjects, population, control group, experimental group, placebo, single blind trial, independent variable, and hypothesis and randomization. So I'm now going to head you guys over to my colleague Adil Mirza, who's going to talk to you about section 2.
Thank you very much for that, Munib. So yeah, I'll just speak to you a little bit about section 2. So my name is Adil Mirza. I'm a stage 4 medicine student in UCD. I did my HPAT in 2019, in which I scored in the 90th percentile. And yeah, so I'm just going to give you a bit of information on section 2 and some tips that I used, some things that I find very, very helpful. So here's just some general information. So there you have 50 minutes to answer 42 questions, which gives you 9 questions to do every 10 minutes. I found that in the actual exam, the stems can be very, very long. So be prepared to read quicker than you're used to. And when I was actually doing my practice exams, I'd finish section 2 with maybe 3-4 minutes to spare. However, in my actual exam, I had no time to spare whatsoever. I finished right at the very end. So yeah, be prepared to speed up if necessary. However, I did find this to be the least time pressured section, and just mainly compared to the other two because they can be quite difficult to get done in the time. But yeah, so you should be able to, I personally believe you should be able to get this done relatively comfortably within the time limit. There's three main question types that you have. So there's doctor-patient interactions, which are relatively short. There's not that much information in it, so you should be able to get them done relatively quickly. The passages, which can vary immensely. You can get questions that are like a quarter of an A4 page and questions that are a page and a half. So yeah, the best sort of strategy would be to go for the unit questions that have a small passage and a good few questions associated with it, because they can just really help you save time, and they can also just really give you confidence, because if you're staying on time in the early stages, then you'll feel more confident that you can get the full full section done on time, and yeah, that will just really help you really enforce that positive thoughts. And then there's also cartoons. Again, there's not really much to read there, so it can save you a lot of time. However, there's a bit of a knack to it, so just practicing them on your whatever program you're using to practice, practicing them beforehand, they can really help you speed up your time and yeah, decrease the amount of time you're spending on them. So what this section is all about, it's about applying interpersonal skills to theoretical situations, and you have to do that quite often, actually, as a medical student, because a lot of time you'll have sort of made-up scenarios or actor scenarios where you have to try to find out what the actor is displaying, or what the condition they have, and you have to try and see what they have and try and treat them and act properly with them. You have to be able to display an understanding of emotions and intensities of emotions. And you have to be able to take in a huge amount of information in a very short space of time and answer questions on that information. A lot of the time you're tested on this sort of information, even in hospitals and settings as a student. And also when you're acting as a doctor, you have to take in a huge amount of information in that short space of time, in that small consultation, and be able to diagnose a patient in that time, or at least get a good differential diagnosis, kind of have a good idea of what that patient has. That's just some of the kind of the uses of that. You also have to be able to infer feelings of characters and what may happen next, and be able to empathize with them. So that's another feature of being a doctor. You have to be able to understand what the patient is feeling, understand what they are going through, and be able to see what you can do to help them, and what they may do next, or may ask for next. Yeah, interpersonal skills are essential as a doctor. You're constantly dealing with patients day in, day out. So having these sorts of skills are absolutely vital. You have to be able to understand the feelings and emotions of patients from both a non-medical and medical perspective, because you have to know what they really want from you. Like they may not even, some patients may not 100% need just, like a diagnosis or need like medications or whatever. They may just need a bit of support, a bit of help to understand what they're going through. So yeah, understanding that. And then also a lot of patients sometimes may be a bit sensitive. I mean, it can be a sensitive time going to the doctor. So you have to understand what you can do to avoid hurting them, avoid offending them, trying to treat them as humanely in many ways, like, as you can. So you have to understand which words, which phrases, what you can say to make them feel better. And yeah, again, being able to take in a huge amount of information in a very small, short space of time. Yeah, just for example, like reading the patient's medical history, you have to be able to do that very quickly, and just tailor your questions for those situations. So here's my approach to the section. So often you're completely exhausted after section 1. So what I did was I would just close my eyes and take a deep breath before section 2. So I'd use that minute gap in between, and then really just try and take a full breath and then change my mindset, because section 2 and section 1, they're vastly different in like the mindset needed. So yeah, you kind of have to start thinking in a emotional or interpersonal manner. And then the strategies for going about the questions. So I personally would read the passage first. I read like the small description at the start, and then I read the passage first, because I needed the context. Other people, they prefer to read the questions first and then the passage, because then they knew what to look out for. Do whatever suits you best, whatever you find fastest or more effective. but I will 100% recommend reading the little description at the top, because that always puts it in context, and that's probably the most vital part of the passage, because it's quite a good summary. And then sometimes you can also even like pretend to be the characters and emulate the situations, and you can do that in your practice as well. So if you're like pretending to be the character, you're trying to like see the world through their eyes, and you can try to see their emotions and how they're feeling, and yeah, it can help you empathize with them, like from my personal experience. For time management purposes, the multi-part questions with small passage first. That way you can answer all the questions far quicker. And then if you're on time in the early stage, then yeah, you're more than likely going to finish it, because you'll know, okay, I'll have perhaps a little bit more time to spend on the longer questions with one question. So then you're not as worried about getting every question done, because you should be able to. Again, you not forgetting about cartoons, as they can really help you save time. So practice them beforehand and make sure you're quite good at them. Then the vocab can be very, very difficult. So in your practice, make sure you have some vocab lists, or like some synonyms, or anything that you find that you hadn't seen before, and then it'll just help you recognize things quite often. Some words that come up quite often would be like apprehension, pragmatic, those sorts of things. Just writing them down if you're not sure, and yeah, it'll just help you recognize them easier. And that can also actually help you with Leaving for me anyway, I found my Leaving Cert English just improved drastically after that. Like the language marks, it just really, really improved. So yeah, it's very useful for that. This is an emotion intensity wheel. So you can make your own ones for these. So you can have one for common words that come up, and you can also have one for words that you are that you rarely see, or words that you don't really remember. And you can just, yeah, you can put your own stuff in here. So like, for example, how this works is that you have like an emotion with a low intensity out on the outside, and then emotion with a high intensity out or in the inside. And you can just make your own ones in here, and then yeah, you can use them as study guides. Just some more tips. You can read some fiction novels, and they can help, and you can try and guess how characters are feeling, what they're likely to say next. And then you can also download some speed reading apps and try them. Practice is the best thing you can do, really, but I will warn you that sometimes practicing only section 2, it can really your other sections can get significantly worse, because I found that I was naturally better at section 1 and 3, so then I started to put a lot more effort into section 2, and so I'd maybe spend a full week going through section 2 questions, and then at the end of the week, when I was doing my practice exam, I'd find out that my section 1 was like 20th percentile, my section 2 was like 90th percentile. So then you have to be able to find a good balance, because I found that even in exams, sometimes you can be confident in your answers, but it may not be exactly what the examiner wants, or may not be the proper answer, because the questions can be very subjective. And also because the questions or the answers can be so subjective, like to you personally, if you're doing your questions with someone else, like doing some group work, it can also really help you get a good bit of insight into how other people are thinking, and also reading the explanations for all the questions. So any questions, even if you get them right, just read the description for like why you got it right, why the person's feeling a certain way, why certain words are more correct, like what context certain words are supposed to be used, yeah, all that sort of stuff. Your vocab list, your synonyms and definitions, all that sort of stuff. And on Instagram, there's a page called New Yorker Mag, and you can use that for cartoons, and you can kind of make your own questions, and yeah, try and use that, and that can be quite useful. Yeah, just a few more tips. So time management, use the multi-part questions with a small stimulus. The stems are quite long in the exam. Cartoons very helpful for saving time, and your vocab lists and your emotion intensity wheels and stuff. Okay, I'll now pass it on to Assad to speak to you about section 3. Thank you.
Yeah, that's perfect, Adil. Thank you for that talk there. So, hello everyone. My name is Assad Khan. I'm a 4th-year medical student in Trinity College Dublin, and today I'm going to be giving you the HPAT section 3 guide. As you can see there, I sat my HPAT in 2019. It was in person, but I know you guys are online this time. So just to start off, I'd like to give a bit of general information on what section 3 is. So it's the non-verbal reasoning. It's the section with all the shapes and the patterns. It's almost like an IQ test of sorts. So you have 30 questions and 40 minutes to answer these 30 questions. And on average, you're going to have 1 minute and 20 seconds, which I think is a pretty decent amount of time to answer these ones. The exam contains the 4 main question types, which I know the 60s are very familiar with: next in sequence, pick the middle, missing segment, and transformation. And as you know, section 3 is actually weighted less than section 1 and 2. So those two are both 40%, and section 3 is 20%. But I'd like to just say, don't let that change the amount that you study. So I feel like section 3 can benefit a lot from studying. So it doesn't mean you should study less for it just because it's weighted less, because you can improve your mark greatly by studying. Okay, so in my general tips and strategies that I'm giving, I'd obviously say, if you're running out of time, make an educated guess after you eliminate a few answers. This holds true for pretty much every single section. The HPAT is a very, very time constrained exam, so you're going to be running low on time. You're not going to be able to answer every question to the best of your ability. So when something difficult comes up, you might just want to eliminate the answers that are clearly wrong, choose the answer that you think in your best judgment is correct, and move on. I'd also say some questions may take longer than average, but you can make up the time in easy questions. So on the day of my exam, and throughout all of my practice exams, I've always been bad at pick the middle. I dreaded it. I used too much time on it. I was over 1 minute, 20 seconds every time I did those questions. However, for the next in sequence questions, which I really liked, I was usually under 1 minute, 20 seconds. So when the exam day came, I noticed that it took a long time on the first part of the exam because there was a lot of pick the middle questions that came up. But then towards the end, I noticed next in sequence questions came up. I went through those fine, and at the end of the day, I had my section 3 done in time. I'd also say always have a pen and paper with you when you're doing your practice tests or questions. The reason for this is that section 3 involves a lot of drawing your diagrams, drawing your shapes, drawing your techniques. So on the day of the exam, actually, you'll have a piece of paper and pencil. And obviously, I'd advise you to do your techniques, draw your diagrams. And to be more used to that, you should do the same on your practice tests to sort of emulate the final exam environment. And for this one's more for the 5th year students that first learn your techniques, then do a practice exam. So any 5th year or other students, when you do get to practicing for your HPAT, I'd say don't run into your practice exam without looking at a few techniques and things for section 3. Yeah, you'll be very confused if you don't. I'd also say after you do your practice tests, and this can probably hold true for some 6th year students now as well, maybe go back and look at your practice tests, try and figure out which of your segments is kind of lacking. So sometimes I would do a practice test and I think, okay, my missing segment looked to be the question type that I really struggled on. I'm going to go ahead and do a few practice questions on that and bring that up to par, because you want to bring all of your weaknesses up to par. It's easier to gain more marks by doing that. I'd also like to say that simple patterns are more likely to be correct than complicated patterns. So when you find out 2 patterns that work and one of them seems very simple and the other one seems like, I don't even know where you got it from, it's very unusual, but they both technically work. So to choose between them, I'd always go for the simple one. The simple one is the one that's more preferred. And also when you get into the exam, you're going to be extremely stressed. You're going to be confused what's going on. There's going to be multiple components to be looking at. So I'd say just focus on one component at a time, follow that, keep yourself focused, and it can really help you in doing that. So just in my personal experience and my personal tips that I give you, I'd say your best sections on practice tests might not actually be your best sections on the day. So don't get worried when your favorite section goes badly. So for me, throughout all of my practice tests, every single one of them, section 1 was the best by a good bit, and my section 2 was always bad, and section 3 was just medium. Then on the day of the exam, I felt like my section 1 didn't go as great. I was very stressed. I was worried. I very, very barely finished on time, and that was with the help of educated guesses. So I didn't let that bog me down, because it's all about positive mindset, I'd say. So when your sections that you think might go well go badly, don't throw in the towel. Remember that your next sections might be able to bump your mark back up, and you can still save the exam. I'd advise that you finish section 3 under the 40 minutes. So when you do your practice exams, I'm sure you might have been able to finish under 40 minutes, because typically section 3 is not as time constrained as section 1. That's the one that you're typically going to go overtime for. So for this one, I advise on the test day, try to get everything done within the 40-minute time limit. That's just advice there. And out of all the sections, section 3 is often the easiest to improve, particularly over the first few months of HPAT. So when you start your studying, everyone tells you HPAT's an aptitude test. You can't really improve your mark. But for section 3, it's absolutely not true. The more you practice your techniques, the more you practice your exam techniques and practice exams and go through it again and again, the better you get at section 3. And I also saw that. I've seen my section 3 mark going up and up as I went through. And HPAT specific practice is the best way to improve section 3. So sadly, unlike section 2 and section 1, where you might be able to practice your mental maths when you're in school, you're not using a calculator more, you might be able to look at like the New York magazine on Instagram and see some cartoons or read some novels. In section 3, that's not really the case. You pretty much just have to do specific HPAT training. So just go through your practice questions is the advice there. And also, if the option is available, I'd say try to do group study with your classmates that are also doing the HPAT. So when I was in 6th year, I had 2 friends that were also doing the HPAT, and I found it particularly helpful, especially for section 3, when the 3 of us got together, went through some practice questions. Some of us were good at it, some of us were bad. Sometimes I would get it, sometimes they would get it, and then we'd explain how we got to it, what techniques we used, and we improved our abilities over time with that one. So just going to move on now to some exam day tips. So I know a lot of you are in this stage right now. It's the week before the exam. You're really stressed, but what I would say is don't do too much HPAT work. I'd say keep it to a minimum. Don't overload yourself. The HPAT's definitely not like the Leaving Cert. You shouldn't be cramming till the last minute because you're going to burn out. And the HPAT is not something that you want to burn out for. You want to be fresh. You want to be ready on the day. It's not like a Leaving Cert where cramming can really help. You want to get into a good sleep routine, sleep and wake up at regular times. I know you guys are able to set the time for your exam, I believe, for the schedule. So you want to be making sure that you're awake. You're waking up before that time and you're going to sleep at a regular time as well. I'd say tidy your room and take off posters off the wall. So any of that preparation, I'm sure Hamad will go through this as well. You want to get that out of the way because you don't want to be sitting there the last hour before the exam starts trying to get everything set up. That's not a good way to do it. And I'd say don't stress about Leaving Cert mock exams. So I know a lot of schools, they have their mock exams around this time, or they may have already have it, or they might have it in a little bit. I told my teachers even just, guys, the HPAT's very important. I don't really have time to study for this Leaving Cert mock exam. I hope you understand, but my grades are not that great because the HPAT, I think, really should take priority, and you shouldn't be too bogged down about your mock results because you do have plenty of time after them to improve your Leaving Cert. But right now, I'd say HPAT focus all the way. So in the night before the exam, you want to be positive. Don't start doubting your abilities. We've said this to you before and we'll say it again. When you're leading up to the exam, you can sometimes doubt your abilities. You might do a practice question, you got it wrong, and you're like, oh no, I'm going to do terribly. Just don't get into that. Remember, you've come to this seminar, you've done your practice exams, you've done your practice questions, believe in your abilities, and you will succeed. Don't touch any HPAT related things the night before the exam. That's my advice. The last thing you want is to have your confidence completely shattered after you get a question wrong, and you really don't want to end up falling down the rabbit hole of doing practice questions all night and not sleeping and getting your 8 hours at least. So that's why you have to get to bed early and remain well rested for the exam day. And you want to ensure that all of your items and everything is set up and prepared for this test that you're going to have. And Ahmad will once again go through that in detail. So on the day of your exam, you're going to wake up, you're going to feel fresh, brush your teeth, everything, go downstairs, eat a healthy breakfast, ensure you have a good amount of carbohydrates because your brain really needs glucose, and the HPAT is a very intense exam. You want to stay hydrated, drink plenty of water, get the glucose, get everything prepared for the test. You want to create your own bubble, ask your family not to disturb you. You want to focus solely on the HPAT. No more Leaving Cert worries, none of that, anything, just fully HPAT focused for that day. And you want to remember, once you do get into this exam, you don't want to dwell on questions for extended periods of time. You make an educated guess and move on. That's like the theme of the talk, in my opinion, almost. Because the HPAT is absolutely not the Leaving Cert. It's not like any test you've done before. It's super time constrained. It's all about just doing a points grab, really. It's not like you want to get 100%. You just want to get as many points as you can before the timer runs out, really. So that's the end of my talk there. I'm going to hand it over to Hamad now.
Thank you, Sad. I will be talking today just about the actual how the day goes. So my name is Hamad, and I did the HPAT last year, and I'm studying medicine in Trinity. And so obviously the HPAT is essentially the same exam. There's no difference in terms of the quality of the questions, but obviously in terms of your performance on the day, the techniques and skills that are required to perform well in an in-person exam are different to an online exam. And certainly it was true for me. Like we've never done an online exam worth, anything important, like TY exams during lockdown don't count here, I'm afraid. So, you have to be prepared in a completely different way. And that essentially starts off with, in my opinion anyways, making sure your internet and your computer/laptop is going to hold up on the day. Now, your internet is by far the most important thing here. Like your internet needs to hold up, and if you're worried, even if you have passed the test, that your internet is not going to hold up, there's two main ways I would say that are going to be, by far your best ways. And those are going to be an Ethernet cable, which will just basically improve the speed of your internet, or reducing traffic, which basically just means like disconnecting the other devices in the house. On ProctorU, which is the proctoring service, if you don't know what proctoring means, it just means it's basically like the examiner is in your room, but obviously through the camera on your computer. So the proctoring service, they do have all the tech specifications. You can run a test on your device and it gives you, I think it's 4 ticks, and it gives you all sorts of details. And all you have to do is just make sure that you pass all those things. And if you don't, like I remember I didn't pass the first time, all you have to do is just Google how to increase or decrease, whatever it is that they want you to fix. So once you have your internet and your device sorted, the next thing is to actually pick the time. This is a freedom that you never know, really, or you've never known, rather. So in the Leaving Cert, the time is given for you. In every other exam, the time is given for you. And this means that you can choose a time that in theory should optimize your performance. My personal recommendation for all of you would be to do it in the morning, sometime starting between 9 and 11. The reason for that, I know from personal experience, our school day used to start at 8:40. And I always felt that I was a bit sluggish in period 1, which was 8:40 to 9:40. But period 2 was when I really started, was when I was at my best, I felt, which is at 9:40. And so that's where I sort of chose my exam to start in that sort of golden period, which is designed, if you start well, it usually bodes well for your performance. So the timing, that's a real important factor. Another important factor is actually on the day. The way it works is you log into the ACER platform, you sign in, and then from there you go into the proctoring service. And just to make sure kind of how the day goes, all you really have to do is just listen to what they tell you to do. It's actually very straightforward. But I found watching the videos online, and I think it's a YouTube channel, and I'm sure there's a few hyperlinks on their website as well. All that means is you just kind of know what to expect. It's sort of like, you've already watched the movie before. You kind of already know where the plot's going to go. And it just made me feel more comfortable on the day. They do tell you that you need a mirror. That's really only if you have a desktop. And the reason for that is you can't show behind the desktop. Whereas if you have a laptop, you can just kind of lift it up and show it around. So you only really need the mirror. If that's true, I know a friend of mine, he didn't have a mirror. He used his phone to show the back of behind the desktop. So it's not the end of the world. Don't be stressing too much about the mirror. Also, use the same laptop or computer that you've been using for your practice exams on the day of the exam. The next slide will talk about it more. The day of the exam is not the day to start freestyling all this stuff. So if you're used to doing it on your device, I'd highly recommend you see to it that that's the device you're going to use on the day. Now, for those of you in 6th year, you've obviously all picked your dates and times, I'm assuming. There is a provision for basically, if you do the exam and something goes wrong, your internet dies, your internet dice is going to be the main one, the power goes out, stuff like that. What they do usually is that because ACER is tracking everything on the platform and proctors have a record of everything that's going on, what they do is your internet gets kicked off. You send ACER an email being like, this is what's happened. They go back, they double check. Once they see what's happened and that, you've lost, say, 45 minutes for reasons that have nothing to do with you, they let you back into the exam for that period of time. That's why the exam testing period is a week, because the first 4 days, so the Friday to Monday, is all sort of doing the exam. And then the next days, I think they're like the back 3 days, so the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that type thing, is all to be, that's the time that they have designated to let people back into the platform to do the exam. In terms of timing, obviously the lads have talked about how important timing is on the day. I actually think it's you kind of come out ahead when you're doing it online, because they, if I remember correctly, they have a stopwatch. It's, you know, for section 1, for me, it started off at 105, so 65 minutes, and it just works its way down. So keeping track of timing is grand. If I remember correctly, they don't let you wear a watch, but that's not a big deal at all because you have the time right in front of you. I used a mouse because I was using my desktop, but I don't think you'd be at any disadvantage using a trackpad. It's just purely preference. And also, you need to have a clear water bottle. They don't let you, they just need to be able to see that it's just water inside. It's a bit silly, but it's a pretty serious exam, so they like to take as many measures as they can. And in terms of actually getting yourself into the exam, the single most important thing is to stay composed, okay? The unfortunate truth is that the proctors don't really understand what the HPAT is. Frankly, they don't care a huge amount. So what that means is it's just a normal day for them. It is obviously not really a normal day for us sitting the exam. And it just means you just have to listen to what they're saying. I remember thinking this very clearly. Getting into the exam should not be harder than doing the exam. Okay, the HPAT, as the lads have said, is currently the hardest exam we'll ever do. Getting the proctoring service set up should not cause us more stress. And the way to go about that is genuinely just listen to what they say. I find it actually very easy to just follow. You click what they want you to click. You say yes when they want you to say yes. Like, it's grand. It's the hardest part, I think, genuinely, for doing it online is, keeping yourself together. But it is absolutely crucial. I can't stress that enough, especially because none of us have any experience doing it before. Okay. And in terms of, Saad talked earlier about how to optimize performance. There's a couple different techniques that are designed to optimize online performance. The big ones for that start off at the very basics. We talked about, mapping for section 3. You're going to be writing stuff out for section 1 for, your problem solving specifically. So you have 2 A4 pages. That means you have 4 pages. For those of you who have been doing practice exams, ideally you should have been doing them using those 2 A4 pages and limiting yourself to that, that level of resources. And the reason for that is just so you're used to it. I remember I don't ever remember running out of space on any exam I ever did. So that's not going to happen. Little things, if you're drawing a map for, a section 3 question, keeping the square just a normal size is a good idea. You're not really going to run out of space anyways, but you're definitely not going to run out if you just keep everything to normal size. Pencils, they're important. Make sure they're sharpened. I'm a bit picky for stuff like this. And so I have a favorite pencil, bought a few of them, sharpened them to my taste the night before. Completely, not like I didn't do well in the HVAC because my pencils were sharp, but just feeling comfortable is really important in the exam, and that was a way to make me feel comfortable. So if you're like that, I'd highly recommend it as well. So I talked earlier about the importance of your routine. I completely agree. And the key thing to note here is the routine starts, I would say, around 6:30 the night before. So you do need to have, you don't need to micromanage yourself, but you have to have some idea what your night before looks like, and what examples of what it should not look like is 2 hours on TikTok, playing FIFA till 11:30, stuff like that. You want to just try and optimize yourself. It's important. Also, a little bit of a sleeper bit of advice here is you need to get your sleep set up now so that you're not relying on just sort of accidentally getting a good night's sleep. So you can't go from sleeping at 2 a.m. every night and then expecting yourself to fall asleep at 11:30 the night before the exam. We talked about food and drink. Again, you're allowed water in the exam, so that's not too big a deal. Ensuring quiet in the house is very important, especially most of us, I assume, live with our families. It's important, I would say, that everybody should know that the exam's going on. That makes sense that for you to do well in your exam, ideally you'd want as quiet as possible. It's not impossible to do well in the HPAT with quiet. I've met one of my friends had a lawnmower go off during his exam, and he got in the 100th percentile. So it's not some impossible feat. Like it's not something that, like, if you hear a noise, you should just lose, go on tilt and throw your exam. It's nothing like that. This last bit of advice, or the second last bit of advice rather, it's one of the sort of sneaky problems that could arise from an online exam. And it's basically, when I say talking to yourself, I mainly just mean reading, not in your head, but not aloud. It's sort of that in between, where the problem for the proctor is that he can't tell the difference between you reading the question and you just essentially talking to somebody else or trying to talk to somebody else. Because as I said, remember, he doesn't know anything about the HVAC. He also doesn't care at all about the stimulus or the text or anything like that. So it's just something that, look, the reality is if it happens, you just explain what's going on. You show him around your room, he'll see that it's nothing but the four walls, and you go on with your exam. But it's just something like you really want to avoid the amount of times you have to talk to your proctor. And it's just a small thing to keep in mind. If you think you do it, I know it's almost contrary to what I've just said, don't overthink it too much. So don't be thinking like consciously, oh my God, just be quiet, be quiet, be quiet. But it's just something to keep in mind that, you don't want to have to talk to your proctor during the exam. And that kind of leads nicely into the last point I have, which is you're allowed to go to the bathroom, but you really don't want to be going to the bathroom during sections. So you only want to be going to the toilet, ideally, obviously, in between sections, because you are technically, you're not allowed a break, but you don't lose any time by going in between sections. So you can go after your 42 section 1 questions, and then you go to the toilet. You don't lose any time into your section 2. And that's one from a convenience perspective. It helps to, it could give you a break as well, which is useful. Again, you don't have to overthink that too much, planning, saying you're going to go to the toilet in between every section or anything like that. But leading on to the thing about not wanting disruption during the exam, unless it's an emergency, you really don't want to be going to the toilet and disrupting your flow and having to come back and pick up the pace and stuff like that. And the last one, I couldn't possibly give you guys advice about the HPAT without mentioning this. You have to trust yourself. You have to have self-confidence going into that exam. You have to trust your hard work, trust that you've put in the hours, done the practice exams, because on the day of the exams, you're going to have to make a load of 50-50 calls, a load of, I think it could be this, but I'm going to go with this. And if you get stuck in your own head, unfortunately, the questions won't come out for you. So the day of the exam is not the day to start second guessing yourself. So hopefully all that helped. I'm going to pass it back to Adil. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mal. So I'll just share this here. So this is a talk on improving your HPAT. It's by someone who has gone from getting 55th percentile in his first year, getting 95th percentile in his second year. Unfortunately, he's unable to attend the talk today. However, he has kindly pre-recorded his section. So I'll just play the video here now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys now about improving your HVAC. So I've labeled it. So just to introduce myself, my name's Ippa Mirza. I'm the sort of the kind of the voice you're always hearing in the little intermissions. I am a third year medical student in Trinity College Dublin, and so I labeled this slide this topic as 55th to 95th because it talks about how I went from 55th percentile in my first HVAC attempt to 95th. So as you can see there, like it's quite a substantial sort of jump or leap from year to year, and my aim in the next sort of 10 minutes is going to be how I went about increasing what did I do to go from 55th to 95th. Okay, so the first thing to notice here is that the HPAT itself is not a memory-based exam. It's a skill-based exam. It's unlike anything, like you've heard it multiple times already today. You'll hear it again. It's unlike any other exam you'll ever do. It's completely different to what you're going to be doing for your Leaving Cert exams. No matter memorization or sort of just kind of rote learning. is going to help you for the exam. So what will help you in the exam? The HPAT is all about improving the skills necessary on a consistent basis over 5, maybe even 4 or 5 months. That's the real sort of end of the game. When my first attempt, I sort of went into I'm going to work as hard as possible sort of mentality, but for a very short period of time. So over Christmas, I had done sort of 10 exams, almost 10 exams in like 15, 20 days. So obviously like a huge volume and a huge work rate, but again, it really doesn't mean anything because you're not going to improve your skills, your skill set in that period of time. So what skills are necessary? So of course we've heard about speed reading and we've heard about quick maths here. On the right hand side, you can see so those 2 skills are extremely important, as you can imagine, because everything is going to be sort of on that paper. There's will be no calculators and stuff like that. But apart from speed reading, what's really important, I found anyways, was concentration. So how are you able to read, your ability to read a piece of text and sort of memorize it and keep it in your head for that 45 to 1 minute time frame. So just think about yourself, like your own concentration sort of levels, how that has been, how that is yourself. So think about like how impatient you are when you're flicking through your Instagram Explorer page, or when you're watching TV that you're constantly on your phone as well. So if you think about that and then go and think about in the HVAC exam, you're going to have to spend 2.5 hours completely solely focused on one thing, and that's it. So it's really important to sort of build up that concentration level and your ability to just focus on one thing. So one of the techniques I used was to find a sort of journal article or a news article somewhere similar to this that's quite text heavy, and sort of had talked about stuff that is you wouldn't probably know about in school. And then I'd read the text and then read the text as with extreme concentration and obviously using skimming and whatnot. And then after that, then sort of summarizing it in my own words after about 10 seconds. So reading through this, the results page here, or maybe like the sort of conclusions. And then after reading that, be like, okay, so essentially this is all about here. So when in the actual exam, when you read your passage, you'll be able to go into your question stems and know exactly what's going on. So yeah, so concentration, building up the concentration, reading a lot is really important, as well as the quick maths. Okay, so timing is as you've heard numerous occasions already today. Timing is incredibly important. I take the HPAT as sort of a game of odds. The more questions you attempt, the better chance you have of getting more questions correct. That's as simple as that. So you should always aim to complete the paper. Obviously, a lot of people find it difficult, myself included. I find it very, very difficult to finish section 1 and sometimes section 3 as well. So use that sort of, just keep that in mind. So one of the tips, so as Azam said, he said that you were able to bring in an analog watch. That's going to be extremely important for you. You need to make sure that you have one that it's functioning the night before and the day of. So one of the things I said, a little tip that I have for you guys is that when you're in the exam is to make sure before you start section 1 that you set it to 12 o'clock. And that just enables you to just quickly see how long you're going. You're not looking at counting. If you're started at like 10 past, you're not trying to calculate or remember what time you started at. So make sure you start off at 12 o'clock. After you finish section 1, then bring it back again to 12 o'clock for section 2. So that then again, you'll be sort of back on track and it'll be easier to monitor at the time. I remember my own HPAT, I didn't bring back the time, and I was in my first HPAT in section 2. I was like, I don't know what time I started section 2 at. I was like very flustered, and then that just builds up your stress, builds up you're concentrating on time rather than like being really good quality. So it's really important to make sure you reset the watch. And then when you're doing your practice exams, make sure that you're sticking to the time as quickly as possible. It's really important that you understand the importance of practicing your HVAT exams in the time frame, and start them at the time you would usually do your HVAT exam at, and make sure that you're not and sort of going over the time, just giving yourself a minute here, because you won't get that time in the actual exam. And when you're doing the exam, your practice exam, don't guess. Obviously, in the actual HPAT, if you run out of time, you're going to guess the rest of them. But in the practice exams, don't do that, because it'll give you an accurate, it'll show you how many questions you're able to do in the time allocated. And then the final thing with the timing is use the amount of questions you've completed as a sort of gauge to see how you're improving. So if you go from week 1, you're able to do 25 questions in section 1, and then week 7 or 8, you're able to do 40 questions. That's obviously a dramatic improvement, and that's good, and that will sort of boost your confidence. Yeah. So next of all, we're going to talk about strengths and weaknesses. So obviously, when we talk about strengths and weaknesses, we always say play to your strengths, and improve your weaknesses. Oftentimes when people like you guys that are listening to here, that you're extremely high achieving students, you are always doing the best you can probably do and possibly do. You always want to make sure you're not bad at anything. I remember feeling that you're quite competitive with yourself and with others, but it's really important to first. It's obviously really important to improve the weaknesses, but also don't lose track of your strengths, and make sure you play to your strengths on the HPAT day. So you obviously, when you do your HPAT, your practice exams, you'll know what are your strong suits. So for me, I did not like problem solving, but I loved logical reasoning. But I liked logical reasoning, and so just when I was doing the HPAT, I would look for the logical reasoning questions and make sure I did those first before spending an exorbitant amount of time on the problem solving questions. And also in the HPAT, you get a little 30-second window before you actually start the exam, or 30 to a minute window, where you're able to check your answer booklet or your sort of the question booklet for any imperfections or inaccuracies. So you use that time to look for the questions you're good at. So if you're good at logical reasoning, you look for the ones about logical reasons. If you're good at pick the middle, look for the stems. Pick the middles from like 105 to 110. So make sure you do those first. And also understand that you do the questions with the most amount of questions in those sort of little units. So if you see a question that has one passage but 5 questions, and you have to see one passage with 2 questions, make sure you do the one with the 5 first, because more bang for your buck. So yeah, make sure you improve your weaknesses, but make sure you play to your strengths. And finally, the mental preparation. As Saad mentioned in the very beginning, mental preparation is incredibly important. So as you can imagine, you're going to be stressed. It's just inevitable, and to shy away from that and to think that you're not going to be stressed is naive and sort of is not the right way to go about it. So the best thing you can do is first accept you're going to be stressed, and then find ways to manage it. So one of the ways you can manage it is by journaling here. So writing down reasons why you're going to do well in the HPAT, or how you've improved. So your first journal entry for tonight could even be that on August, at the end of August, I sat through a full HVAC seminar, which many of my peers have not done. So that's something to add into your journal. So make sure you're constantly giving yourself reasons why you can manage your stress and why you are in a good position. Also mindset. So changing your mindset. It's all well and good to say be positive about it, but it's tough sometimes to be positive about something when it's draining and stuff like that. So try a little mindset shift. So instead of thinking of it as a task to do, think of it as a stepping stone towards your goal of being a doctor. So make sure you're constantly keeping your mindset in check, and improving that also. And then also another thing that you can also do is that motivation sometimes is hard to rely on. It's hard to rely on your own willingness and motivation to do something. But habit is much easier to, number one, to start and to sort of keep it going. So get into the habit of doing your practice exams on every Saturday at 12 o'clock, to every Monday, Wednesday, whatever, Thursday that you do your drills, Sundays you go over it. So just get into your habit and just think of it, this is what happens, this is what I do on a Saturday, and that'll help you go through. And then the final thing there is HVAC friends. So find people that are doing the HVAC. If you're in a school that medicine, people aren't applying for a HPAT, find friends outside of school that are doing HPAT. Look, you have perfect opportunity here that you have a perfect opportunity here to sort of say hello to people and just be like, I'm doing HPAT, don't have anybody to talk to about it. Like, nice thing to it, like just to sort of network and find people that are in a similar position to you, and you'll be able to sort of bounce ideas off and tell them if you're feeling down about one day, and the other person can helping you up. So it's really important to be friends with people that are very like-minded. Okay, perfect. So that's really that's my part done. I hope you took a lot from that. And here's just a summary. So skills based, the timing aspect, strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you're doing your practice exams in the most optimal way, and the mental preparation, managing that S word and accepting it, and finding ways to sort of get away from that.
So yeah, so I apologize if some things are not as completely relevant, like some of the watch stuff, because the exam is completely online. There are a few things that were not completely relevant, but like I think the majority of the content there was definitely very, very important anyway. So yeah, I'll now hand it over to Ramin, and she's going to speak about alternate routes into medicine.
So, hi everyone, my name is Ramin and I'm a third year medical student at RCSI, and I'll be talking a little bit about alternate routes into medicine. So as you all know, medicine is a really competitive course and a lot of people actually don't get in on their first try. So it's really important to have some backup options, and I'm going to go through some of these options for you all now. So the first and most obvious option is repeating. So you can either repeat the HPAT on its own, or you can repeat both the Leaving Cert and the HPAT. So how do you know which route to take? I'm going to explain that now. So the first scenario you could find yourself in is that you got high points in your Leaving Cert, but a low HPAT score. So generally a high Leaving Cert score would be around 550 points or above. And you basically have two options here. The first option is to take a year out and repeat the HPAT. And this will give you the chance to study for the HPAT without the pressure of the Leaving Cert. And a gap year can also be a really great opportunity to engage in other activities such as paid work, travel, or volunteering. And the second option would be to start a different course and repeat the HPAT while you're in your first year of college. And if you do decide to go down this route, it is important that you choose a course that you're interested in and something that you enjoy, so that if you don't get in on your second try, you're not stuck in a course that you don't like. Also, it's really important to note that if you do get in after completing first year of another degree, you will be liable to pay full tuition fees for your first year of medicine, because it won't be covered under the free fees scheme. And then the second scenario when it comes to repeating is that you got low points in your Leaving Cert. And in this case, you have to repeat both the Leaving Cert and the HPAT, even if you got a high score in the HPAT. So you can't repeat the Leaving Cert on its own, because the HPAT scores are valid for 1 year only. So in terms of where to repeat, you can repeat at your old school if they can accommodate you, a grind school, or even from home by yourself if you're very motivated. And something important to note here is that some people think that you can drop English, Irish, or maths when you repeat, but this isn't the case for medicine. You have to pass all your minimum entry requirements in one sitting. So you can't drop any of your core subjects, basically. Even if you pass them the first time. But you can drop to ordinary level in these subjects if you want to decrease your workload. So the next route would be to study medicine overseas. And the most popular choice would probably be the UK. And you have to apply through UCAS online, which is basically the British version of the CAO. And additionally, you'll have to sit either the UCAT or the BMAT, depending on which universities you're applying to. And these are basically both entrance exams similar to the HPAT. you might have to do an interview as well for certain universities. And the deadline for this has actually passed for this year, but for any fifth years, it's the 16th of October 2023 for 2024 entry. So apart from the UK, there are many other universities in Europe which offer undergraduate degrees taught through English. And these degrees often have lower fees and entry requirements than Irish universities, and they are recognised by the Irish Medical Council. So the most popular countries would be Poland, Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Romania, and Slovakia. And for most universities, you will be required to sit an entrance test and or do an interview. So for exact entry requirements, I would recommend checking out unicast.ie. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about graduate entry medicine. So it is a 4-year accelerated course for anyone who already has an undergraduate degree. And your undergrad degree doesn't have to be science or healthcare related. It can be in any discipline. But you must get a 2-1 or higher. Additionally, you have to sit a test called the GAMSAT, and it's an entrance exam kind of similar to the HPAT in that it tests your reasoning skills, but there are also extra knowledge-based and essay writing components. So it's harder than the HPAT. The schools in Ireland which offer graduate entry medicine are UCD, RCSI, UL, University of Limerick, and UCC. And many universities in the UK also offer this course. It's important to note that graduate entry medicine is much more expensive than the other routes I have mentioned. So your undergraduate degree is covered under the free fees scheme, meaning that the government basically pays your tuition for you and you just pay a student contribution charge. But when it comes to graduate entry medicine, you have to pay your full fees yourself. So it can be quite expensive, but it's still a good backup option for people who really want to do medicine but can't get in through the undergraduate route. So I guess the main thing I want you all to take away from my talk is how important it is to have backup options. Even if you don't get into medicine the first time, it's really not the end of the world. There are always other options available to you. So one low result in your Leaving Cert or your HPAT doesn't define your future career. Sometimes you need to take a different route to achieve your goals, and there's no shame with that. It's completely okay. And if it's meant to be, you will become a doctor someday. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you found that useful.
Thank you very much for that, Ramin. So we're coming now to
Yeah, so that's the recording bit of the session done. So now there's just a Q&A session. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, then go ahead and we'll try and answer as best we can.
Thank you, Adil. Just a quick thing, because this was a couple of years old video that we played, so some of the dates we need to double check, and also a couple of speakers, they have actually graduated now and working in different Irish hospitals. That's Imad Mirza and Saad Khan. They're not students anymore, but at the time of recording of this video, they were studying in final year, I believe. And Hamad, I see you have mentioned few things. You want to just elaborate more on it, or?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk a little bit more. Basically, guys, well, first of all, thank you for coming, and I hope you guys found those videos useful from all of us. Just what I was talking about was just kind of interpreting the video with a little bit of context, basically. And the idea behind the context is just that one thing that wasn't on the slides is that you can use a whiteboard. The reason, my general suggestion when students ask me about what they should use is that I don't suggest the whiteboard because well, there's kind of a very boring reason, which is it's for most of us anyways, an additional expense, and the HPAT is expensive enough already. The other one, and far more common, I think, is that you pretty much will never run out of, as was mentioned in the video, you won't run out of space on those pages, generally speaking. And I never liked the idea of having to rub stuff out, because obviously if you have a whiteboard, you have to write your workings, draw your map for section 3, then rub it out so that you can map the next question. And I never liked that. And I thought it was always kind of more efficient to just have the two A4 pages. And that way your focus is always just writing whatever is going on and never anything else. And then the other point I was saying was, obviously we know that there's 6th years and 5th years, and there's probably a couple of TYs as well, if I had to guess, that are here. And so just on the 6th years, the registration for the exam is open. So you need to get onto the Acer website. I think there is a fee you have to pay. I think it's about €170 to sit the exam, if my memory is correct. But you need to register, and then you need to book you're able to book your day and your time, I think. From memory, I think it's the 15th of February is the first day, or the 14th, which is a Friday. So you need to pick the time and the day that you're going to do your exam, and you book that through ProctorU. And as was mentioned in the video, you have to give that some thought, both in terms of, you want to do your exam, you want to get used to doing your exam so that when you do the exam on the day, it's like you've lived the day before. So that's because when you don't feel like that, then you've no prep. When you've no prep, that's when we make silly decisions under pressure. So the idea is that you pick a time, let's say like 9:30, or 10, let's say, and you just get used to doing your exams at that time. But obviously you need to book your exam first to make sure you actually have your exam on at 10. There's no point to doing your practice exams at 10 to do your actual exam at 2. So it was just to kind of clarify that. And of course, I think the last thing I mentioned was that on the video, I said I'd suggest all of you to do your exams between 9 and 11, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Of course, if you think there's really strong evidence that no, like I said, that period 2 is my best, and if you think that actually period 5 is my best so let's say after lunch, then by all means, completely disregard the 9 to 11 and do it at whatever time you think kind of suits best. Basically, that's kind of what I was elaborating on there. There's someone's asked, I know you guys mentioned making estimated guesses and time management for section 1, but is there any specific way to review your questions for section 1 to improve substantially? Adil, do you have anything to say about that maybe? You're on mute.
Sorry, I was just answering another question. Can you repeat that for me, please?
The one in the group chat. I know
yeah.
you guys mentioned estimated guesses and time management for section 1. Is there any specific way to review your questions for section 1 to improve substantially?
Yeah, I suppose, like, I mean, going through all the, like, at the end when you've done your practice questions, then reading all the explanations at the end, even though you've gotten them correct, just to just to understand, like, kind of where you went wrong, where you're thinking, or where thinking was either correct or wrong. And sometimes you even come to like, you'll get the correct answer, but not in the way that they wanted you to. So then reading how they had well, like, their explanation for things, or like even sometimes they even have like 1 or 2 calculations that you have to do, and then you've done like 6, 7. So then kind of being able to weed down exactly what you need to do or to look at, then that's probably better. Other things are also from like that sort of practice and stuff. You can see sometimes some questions are made to take much longer than you have, because like some questions may take like 5 minutes to answer properly, but like you don't have that time to answer. So you're far better off just putting it like giving you like an educated guess and then moving on to it, and just because that is going to like improve your timing, because you're not wasting time on that. So like that's pretty much what you're going to be doing. Like the main thing is also like um your mental maths, like you're knowing exactly no yeah, essentially just work on your mental maths, so then being able to like you calculate things a lot quicker will speed you up. Um Doing your even just multiplication, like handwritten multiplications, like working it out, that may be, yeah, like practicing that will be handy. Even like long division and stuff, just doing that because you won't have a calculator. So yeah, that's what I say.
Right. Cheers. So Shahira's asked a very good question, actually. How much could one realistically improve between now and the exam? So If we're talking, so today's the 21st of December. Your exam is probably just under 8 weeks away. Okay. I'm a very firm believer, and some of you may already know this already. No matter where you are right now, there is 100% enough time to get to a level required to have a chance on the day of the test. Okay. It's really important that obviously, like, we all impress upon, it's really important. You have to study really hard, all that stuff. And that is true, but it's also really important to remember that the exam is designed in a way that if a student only learns now, so if somebody, let's say, is just under Christmas exams in 6th year and realizes, wait, I want to do medicine. How do I do that? Oh, wait, I have to do the HPAT. That student, in theory, can pick the HPAT up in December and do enough work and have enough time to get to a level high enough to do well on the day. And the examiners keep that in mind. It's one of the big, well, I'm no expert on this in terms of I have no idea what ACER are thinking at any given moment, but it's not a coincidence that the exam is a skill-based exam. Like we had that earlier about Imad mentioning that it's not a memory test. Like it's a skill-based exam, and that means you can pick the skills up in 8 weeks. For the student who hasn't figured out yet or has just figured out that he wants medicine. And so he or she wants medicine. So equally the inverse is true, that or it's kind of, you can borrow that logic and apply it to yourself, which is that no matter where you are, even if you're getting 20s and 30s in your exam, that you do have enough time to change and practice and apply the techniques. Now, it's very important to note, will it be fun? Probably not. Will it be easy? Definitely not. But it is possible. And my general opinion on this stuff is, if it's possible, it's worth aiming for. So that's kind of how I feel, that no matter where you are, Shahira, or where however many people on the Zoom are kind of gearing up for the exam in 8 weeks, that you definitely have enough time, provided you kind of work efficiently and effectively and stuff like that. I don't do Ramin and Adil, do you guys agree, disagree? Anything to add on that?
Not really. Just that, like, yeah, it's definitely possible to improve, but like there is like a substantial amount of effort you have to put in, especially like if you're in 6th year, because you have your own like 6th year commitments, and like with mocks and everything. I um I told all my teachers beforehand, before the mocks and stuff, that I wasn't going to be focusing on that like whatsoever. I was just going to be focusing on HPAT, and then afterwards I'd focus on Liebenschutz stuff. For the most part, they were okay with it. Um, but I do think that is important. Like, it's something that you should definitely consider doing, because you have to put in so much effort into this. Yeah, because it's the weight of 3 leaving cert subjects, so you have to value it at that level.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think I definitely don't think it's too late to improve your score. You guys just started your Christmas break today, so you have 2 weeks, to, get some study in. And yeah, like as long as you kind of put your head down for the next like 8 weeks or however long it is until the exam, like I do think like you can improve your score. Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's really just about putting your head down, I think, at this point, definitely.
Yeah. To reiterate, like it won't be easy, but it is possible, right? And you're all very capable. And like Ramin said, you have the time. You've got a nice 2.5 weeks here to, really make a fist of this exam. We have another question from Kamran. Sorry, Khalid, Uncle, were you going to say something there?
Yeah, actually, I was going to read that question, but please go ahead, Amma.
So Kamran's asked, do you have any tips on interpreting confusing graphs or diagrams? So I'll kind of explain this as best I can. Obviously, we're talking a lot of theory. This will make a lot more sense if you're looking at this while also like having a question in front of you. So for you guys, I'd recommend you, if you have a paper beside you, just kind of take bullet points of what I'm about to say. Okay. Because it'll make a lot more sense when you can look at this with a question in front of you as well. So you write down like tips on interpreting confusing graphs or diagrams. So the first thing you have to do is establish, does your method change depending on how hard the graph or diagram is? And the answer should be no, okay? So often if you have trouble interpreting difficult diagrams and graphs, it's because you don't have a good enough process anyways. It's okay because you can bail yourself out when you just see a diagram that has X and Y, but then you get to a diagram, let's say, that has an X, Y, Y, when they have one kind of axis here and then the other axis on this side. So what I suggest is make sure you have a really solid system for going through every graph and every diagram, no matter how difficult it is. So that would kind of consist of something that looks like every time you see a graph or table, you'll see it straight away when you see the question, right? Visually, on the left side of your screen, there's the stem. On the right side, there's the questions and answers. So you'll know it's coming, basically. So then you're kind of looking for a couple of things. Number one is you need to get the title of the graph. So you need to know what you're looking at, okay? Once you have the title of the graph or table, you're then looking at axes. So that's X, Y, Y, or X and Y, or yeah, you're pretty much always going to have those two, okay? When you look at the X and Y graph, X and Y axis, sorry, you're looking for what is going on. So again, that, the way, like, there's a little heading under the X axis that explains, like, this is, number of cars produced this year or whatever. And then you're looking at units, okay? So is the number of cars in ones, is it in tens, hundreds, thousands, or millions, okay? Because often the questions will expect you to know what units are being described. So you do that for both the X-axis and the Y-axis. And if there's another axis, sometimes there'll be two X-axes, but mostly it's two Ys when they're hard ones, right? And especially if you guys have done practice exams, you'll know that this is the way they catch out. So you have to check the axes, check what it means, and then check what units are being used. Then after that, you need to understand what the graph means. In order to do that, you need to look at the key or the legend. Okay, the key or the legend explains, like, the red line means, BMW, and the blue line means Mercedes. Okay, and again, when you see all this information, it can be really overwhelming. But if you I found, for me personally, like, when you think about it systematically, so you're looking title, axes, units, sometimes a third time axes, units. Then you're looking at the key or the legend, which explains again what you're looking at. And then the fifth step, or I think whatever step we're on, is pick any random point in the table or the graph, or diagram, same thing, and just explain it to yourself. Imad had a great point about when you read stuff. I think he said something like, repeat it back to yourself in your own words in 10 seconds later, or something like that. So same idea, except 1 second. So you see the table, you see the graph, you pick a random point. Okay, so again, this hypothetical car, I'm talking like a crazy person here, but this hypothetical car diagram that we have on the X and Y axis, that you pick, what does the blue line mean? And it means that in 2022, blue equals BMW, and they sold, let's say, 40,000 cars. Okay, now I've understood what's kind of happening. And now you've sort of preemptively solved some of the problems that make the diagrams hard. So because you've answered the question, like, what am I looking at? What are the units? And what is the question trying to tell me? And then after that, you go about kind of solving the problem. So again, I know there was a lot of theory, and it can feel a little bit super complicated without a question in front of us, but hopefully that kind of helps you. Like, you have bullet points there. Remember, your method for harder questions is just executing the same stuff but better. So a lot of those questions, you'll find the information may be difficult to understand, but once you understand it, actually answering the question is easy, because the thing that the exam is testing is, can you look at a complicated graph or table, right? And I'd always describe them like, you'll get a very kind of visceral feeling, like a yuck or an ooh, when you see some of these graphs and tables. And I'm sure the other guys, Adil and Ramin, would agree. Like, you just kind of get this, oh, that looks horrible. And sometimes the only thing they're actually testing is, can you push through that, still kind of keep your wits about you? And the reward for that is actually sometimes the answer will be easy enough. So I hope that kind of answers that question.
Thanks, Ahmad. Thank you so much. We have a question about medical school you went to in Ireland makes difference after graduation. I think we'll drop that because today's webinar is regarding HPAT. Next question is, do you have general tips for problem solving? Especially, I think Ahmad's last comment covered a lot of that. Ahmad, you would like to add anything to it, or you think we last comment was...
Yeah, I have lots to add, unfortunately. Okay, problem solving. First thing, you guys need to know exactly how good or bad you are at this stuff. So you need to have an idea. So some people feel they're really bad at problem solving, because usually when you're doing problem solving questions, it feels kind of uncomfortable. But if you go on mid-entry, when you do your practice exams, you see your kind of percentiles and percentage questions, right? Like whatever, 65 out of 114. And then when you scroll down, you'll see your section 1 breakdown, and you can there's a little button you can click, and it shows you in problem solving and logical reasoning and data interpretation, like how many questions you get right. So the first thing is to be aware of kind of how you're doing in problem solving, because some people feel like they're really poor, but actually they're actually not that bad. Some of them are even quite good. Then again, so back to the kind of face the question is, how do you do problem solving questions? Well, you need to interpret the information properly. The way to do that on a kind of initially anyways, is to know what the important information is. The only way to know what's important is to read the question and the answers properly. It is the only method, okay? So your first thing you have to make sure is, are you reading the question and answers properly? Because that's what tells you where to speed up when you're reading if nothing is relevant, or where to slow down when things you know are definitely relevant. And then after that, you need to be able to interpret and understand the information. In order to interpret and understand the information, you have to have ways of keeping up with what's going on. So either use the Ahmad technique, as we're calling it, which is read it, and then explain it back to yourself, okay? Or use, if it's a table or a graph, explain it to yourself. Or you can write down the rules. Sometimes there'll be stuff like hidden rules, okay? Never assume you're going to remember the hidden rule. Always like make a note, write it down so that you don't forget. And then the other thing with problem solving is you need to know when you're beat, and you need to make sure that even if you get these questions wrong, remember, you all have a 25% chance in every question for section 1, right? It's only A, B, C, D. The worst thing you can do is spend 5 minutes on a question, generally speaking. Okay, not always, but for the most part, 99% of cases, the worst thing you can do is spend, like for context, if you spend 5 minutes on a question, you have no chance of answering questions 42 and 41. They could be really easy, but they're gone forever because you ran out of time. So sometimes be aware for problem solving, and this is something that can be really helpful on the day. If it's tough and you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know where to go, sometimes guessing is really helpful. Just guess, process of elimination, and then move on, put it out of your head, and then focus on the questions you're better at.
Thank you, Madhvika. Next question. For a fifth year or transition year student, when would you recommend they begin studying for HPAT? I'll let Adil or Amin answer that. Ahmad, you can take rest for a few minutes.
I started kind of the summer going into sixth year, and kind of like did a little bit, a tiny bit in fifth year, like did kind of some courses and stuff, just some like minor stuff, just to kind of understand what HVAT is. But then I think kind of over the summer I started doing a lot more, but I know very, very few actually started doing it at that point. Most people start around October of sixth year, to give a good few months, or October, November, December, kind of around that, or yeah, October, November. I think that's probably an okay amount of time, but again, yeah, you're dedicating quite a lot of time at that point, especially when you have like your leaving cert kind of stuff. So if you start a little bit over the summer, might be quite good. Summer going into sixth year, because you'll have time, you'll have free time, and you can just do like little bits, here and there, just do a few drills, a few questions here and there, and then you're kind of balancing up the load, so you're not as stressed kind of coming towards the end. And I think the med entry lasts for a full year, as far as I know. So yeah, you can start early.
Thank you so much. And would you recommend skipping the mocks that are before your HPAT exam? I mean, you want to answer that?
I wouldn't recommend skipping the mocks altogether. I think it's still important to do them, just to kind of give yourself an idea of like what the format of the actual Leaving Cert exam is going to be like when you actually do it. Even if like you don't study for them like at all, I think it's still important to do them, and I would be like surprised if your teachers let you skip doing your mocks. So I would say still do them, but definitely prioritize HPAT and your HPAT preparation over the mocks. Like don't worry about like what grades you're gonna get in your mocks. That's not important, but just for like the format of the exam and like getting used to like it before sitting your actual Leaving Cert, I think it's still important to do. Yeah.
As I understand, they are a good practice for your actual exams, and often they are tougher than the actual exams as well. Just correct me if wrong. Okay, any tips for pick the middle questions? Anybody?
Right. I can help possibly with this. Okay, once again, same thing, guys. You need a paper beside you, because this is all going to sound like a load of nonsense, because we're all going to be talking about theory. Okay, so pick the middle. The first thing you guys need to do, it's kind of an implied, I suppose nobody said it outright. The best way to study for the HPAT is med entry. It's come up a bunch of times, but maybe not as clearly as that. So the first thing is, if you're doing the HPAT, you need med entry, as Adil said. On med entry, in the learn section, there are very useful kind of guides and videos of people going through questions in real time, explaining kind of the thought process about how to do questions, how they know what to map, how to map, if that's a question. So the first thing is, if you've paid for a med entry and you have it, make sure to use it properly. And a big part of Pick the Middle, I think one of the most effective parts of the Learn section on med entry is the Pick the Middle guides, and particularly the mapping guides. So make sure you use them as a first point. If you haven't used them, use them. If you have used them and you're still struggling, you haven't used them properly. So go back. Okay, it's a very simple kind of proof here. So then you've kind of gone to the Learn section, you have an idea, you've watched the videos, you've worked with the videos and the guides. Couple of things, mapping is super useful for Pick the Middle, okay, but often what you'll find is there's a few questions, let's say maybe you're going to get 10 Pick the Middle questions on the day, so let's say 2 or 3 of those are going to be, let's call them really easy, okay, you all should get them right, but equally, you all will get them right, it also means most people will get them right, okay? So ultimately, you then need to focus on the harder Pick the Middle questions. In other words, you need to know how to kind of advance mapping. That's kind of the wording they use on MedEntry. You need to know those techniques and those skills. You need to be able to use multiple maps at the same time to create one kind of coherent picture. Okay, it sounds a lot more complicated in theory than it is in practice, but it's still something to be aware of. One thing I think is really useful on MedEntry, there's a part in the advanced mapping guide where they say that like there's certain maps in not so much in squares or four-sided shapes, but mainly in pentagons, hexagons, septagons, octagons, decagons, that if you just see them, you'll know what the middle is, because the middle can only be one thing, okay? And so what I'd suggest is that's kind of the only thing that's really worth learning off, in my opinion, for section 3. Because if you see those maps, you see them, C's the middle, you pick it, you move on. That gives you enough time then to kind of attempt the other Pick the Middles or the other next in sequence, whatever you're finding difficult. And then if you're stuck, if there's nothing to map, one thing you can do is remember the sequence makes sense if you saw it in order. And so usually if you see kind of a couple options, like let's say, like I said, there's 5 options. If you see that like A and C look similar, then you just write down on your page A and C, AC basically. And you kind of think that no matter what the pattern is, whether it's AC or whether it's CA, because remember it can go forwards and backwards, you kind of know they're together. So you can kind of pair things up that look similar. And then you might have, say, 3 pairs, and you just kind of have to connect them. So it's called the comparative method. And so that's something that can help for those Pick the Middle questions that are not the easy ones, essentially. And then the last thing for Pick the Middle is, remember, they don't, as much as you guys are sort of, this is kind of a bit mean, but essentially you guys are kind of robots when it comes to section 3, where you're really good at finding specific things. And remember that the exam doesn't really want to test that, in my opinion. That's what I mean by there's only like 3 of these handy, really nice Pick the Middles. So remember that you have to be composed enough to see an easy pattern, but something that you're not used to looking for. Does that make sense? So it's really important that if the pattern is different, that you are composed and relaxed enough in the exam to just be like, okay, wait, mapping, there's nothing here to map. Comparative, there's nothing here to compare. Let me try something else. So a big part of difficult, not Pick the Middle, but just section 3, guys, is you have to be composed if your first plan or your plan B or plan C or even plan D doesn't work. Because often, like I said, what they're testing is, can you stay composed under pressure? Because the pattern itself won't be hard, but staying composed long enough, because 80 seconds, while it's not that long, is also a very long time if you're struggling to do anything. A big part is stay composed, so that if you see those patterns that are really unusual but not difficult, that you may actually see them. So that's kind of a big thing I'd say for section 3 in general. And then, like I said, for Pick the Middle, be really good at mapping, learn your maps off, and then comparative method is another way of doing some of those harder Pick the Middles.
Thank you so much, Ahmad. Next question we have, how much time is ideally enough to dedicate to HPAT preparation if you really only took up the idea of doing medicine now? Anybody wants to answer that? Adil, Ramin, Ahmad?
I can answer that one. I think it's hard to like quantify and put like an exact number, like, oh, if you do this many hours of studying, you'll do well. And your HPAT doesn't really work like that. I suppose it's more about like the quality of your studying over quantity. But I think like at this point, like when in the lead up to like my HPAT exam, I think I was trying to do like, one practice exam every week, and then like spending like, time like going through each of the sections, going through all the questions I got wrong, seeing, you know, where I needed to improve. But yeah, so like I would say like definitely like maybe at this point try to be doing like a practice exam a week, and like maybe throughout the week doing, if you have med entry, doing like the kind of drills with the um kind of shorter questions throughout the week as well. But again, it's very like I think personal to you, and like it depends on how much time you have and to dedicate to it. But yeah, I think it's really about like quality over quantity, I think.
Thank you, Ramin. Next question, I think half of that you've already answered. The question is, as a medical student, how difficult are the exams and roughly how much effort and time you put towards it? So the time part is it's quality or quantity, and about difficulty, Adil or Hamad, what do you think?
Adil's done one of these, so I'd say he's a better person than I am to answer this.
Okay. Yeah. Difficulty, it varies a lot. Actually kind of varies between universities from what I've heard. But like it's the same with anything. You're gonna have to put in a huge amount of effort into things. I think yes, doing as much like like honestly like saying difficulty is it's kind of a strange thing. Like some exams are gonna be like tougher than other ones. I tend to find essay papers like quite difficult. But then MCQs are fine. I know RCSI are majority MCQ, so you can maybe tailor around that or something. Um, but yeah, like you're all just expect that they're going to be hard. I think that's probably the best thing. And you do have to put in like a lot of effort. Like you're not going to be able to walk into something without studying and then do well, or even pass. Like most people would have been top performers in Leaving Cert, like are in medicine at the moment, and in medicine, pretty much everyone would be, around the same level. So like, and a lot of people will be struggling like to pass, even though they're one of the best in the country for leaving cert. So yeah, it's difficult.
Thank you so much. Last question we have, I'm not sure if I understand the question clearly. It says, is math and English pass on year of HPAT?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you have to pass them in the year that you do the hit.
Okay,
Or actually, I mean, if you're doing the leaving cert at the same time, then yeah. But like if you're not, then it's like if you're not redoing the leaving cert, then you don't need to do anything else.
thank you so much. I think we don't have any more questions for today. And I shared link to our YouTube channel. We have, okay, actually we have one more question. So if you can check the YouTube channel, you'll see recordings of the previous year's HPAT tips and tricks webinars that we did. And a lot of questions are answered there as well. Next question is, if using an old
Leaving cert is still necessary. No, it's not. Like if you're using your old leaving cert, then you don't have to do anymore. It's not like I mean, you just have to do your HPAT. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much, all three of you. What I'm going to do is I am allowing the participants to start their video. If I'll be taking screenshot, we'll be sharing it after with the recording or on our social media channels. If you feel comfortable, you can come on camera and I'll take few screenshots of the participants. So if you guys want to come online, it will be great. I see a few faces showing up now. We'll give it a few moments before people can come online. If anybody wants to come online, feel free on camera. Okay. Just give a few minutes and then we'll take the screenshots. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today's webinar. And this concludes today's webinar. Participants, panelists, if you can stay on for a few moments, the rest of the people, you're free to drop now. We'll appreciate if you can drop from the call, and we have to conduct a post-webinar short meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.